Today we're getting experimental and we're comparing two identical frames in two different frame materials. One is made out of steel and one is made out of titanium. Today we're getting experimental with these two identical except for frame material Neuhaus Metalworks Hummingbirds. I love these frames. I ride them all the time. I'm very familiar with the steel one. I just got the Thai one in, and today it's time to ride them back to back with the same parts on the same trail. So since this is an education channel, I encourage you to expand your mind and be open to learning new things and set some of your preconceived notions aside. And I need a big disclaimer here because this only applies to the Hummingbirds. This doesn't apply to another brand's steel versus Thai. I've done a few steel versus Thai tests in my life, and from some brands, the steel is stiffer, and in other brands, the steel is more compliant. And it's all because of that tube selection, the tubing diameter. These tubes are not the same size. They're different thicknesses inside, and they're also different diameters as well. And so if Nick had chosen to run really big tubes on the Thai one, it's gonna ride a lot different than if he chooses to run really small tubes. It's gonna be fun to see how the material properties of each of these materials comes into play in the ride feel. Now, Nick is a good friend of mine, and he is one of the true big brains in the industry. Every time I talk to him, I learn something. He and I teamed up over at the Sedona Mountain Bike Fest, and we did a about 40-minute long question and answer about steel versus Thai, tubing profile, 3D printing, additive manufacturing, how he approaches different models. That is available to review over on my Patreon. So if you want to go watch that, become a patron, dive deep in the rabbit hole with Nick Neuhaus, my favorite nerd frame builder. We're gonna run it single speed because I feel like single speeds talk to you more. Especially when you stand up and sprint, you can feel how the rear end flexes. We've got an i9 Hydra hub on these Forge and Bond carbon wheels, specialized ground control tires, front and rear, kind of a lightweight, zippy, XC-ish single speed setup. Now, when I talk with Nick about these, I'm like, how do they ride different? And he said, you really have to ride them to know, which I'm so grateful that I get to. And he does a lot of demo events where you can ride both back to back. But he explained it this way. The steel Hummingbird is like a Cadillac CTS. It's got the Corvette motor, it's got all that power and performance, but it's got a more luxurious, comfort-oriented ride. The titanium one, he says, rides more like the Corvette. It's a little bit stiffer, a little bit sportier, same motor, same power, but a little bit less comfortable. So that's Nick's take, the designer of these frames. I'm excited to go see what I feel when I ride it. Let's go hit the trails. Man, I absolutely love the Hummingbird. Nick builds such special bikes. The Hummingbird is one of the most supple steel frames I've ridden, which will make it for a really great comparison to the Thai one. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, bikes were so focused on weight. That was the metric we measured bikes on. You know, if it was 50 grams lighter, obviously it was a better bike than something a little heavier. Now frame builders are a little wiser, and they know it's worth 50 grams to keep material in certain places so it doesn't ride like a wet noodle. Man, there's something special about a single speed hardtail. Just such a simple machine. I'm not getting any weird flex. Still easy to manual and throw around. Oh man, what a joy to ride. This is an XC/trail bike. And it's fun riding an XC trail bike to its limit. I'd rather be slightly underbiked than overbiked to myself. My Evel Knievel days are behind me. I just like trail riding. Oh man, that's so easy to control. So even when a frame is compliant like this, you won't mistake it for a full suspension. It doesn't track the ground. You don't feel it flexing. I'm just doing a short little 20-minute loop so fatigue doesn't set in. I don't want to be tired on round 2 and feel like I have more vibrations because my body's tired. So we're just gonna do a quick little loop here. Nice compliant frame. Oh, the geo on this frame is so good. Oh, it loves to just pop off of everything. What a bike. So if you'd like my advice on which bike would be perfect for you, I have a service over on Patreon, a bike consultation service, where we can chat together. I can find out your needs, your budget. I can even help you look at used bikes. You send me used bike classifieds and I'll tell you if I think they're a good deal or not, or how much I think they should be worth. I'd love to help you over there. Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah, this does not, I do not notice flex when standing and sprinting to climb on this. It's not quite as direct drive as some others. If you benefit from this video, consider donating in one of the links below. Feel free to share this channel with your friends who need to learn more about bikes and why they behave the way they do. Hello. Thank you. It's just me. Have a good day. So a lot of people are familiar with Reynolds tubing. Reynolds is a brand name like Nike. Nick's tubing is not Reynolds tubing, but he's actually custom ordered each tube on the frame in a different profile for its different jobs that each tube does. Each part of a frame has a different aspect into how the bike controls. He talks about that over in my Patreon chat. You want to check that out if you're a bike nerd. He really goes into great detail. All right, that was a good ride. Let's throw these parts on the tie frame and see what it feels like. All right, I just swapped all the parts over onto the tie frame. We've got the Forge and Bond wheels, same exact tires. I mean, it's the same exact wheel swap, so the tire pressure is identical between the two. The only difference is the crank and the bottom bracket and the saddle, and the grips. Everything else is identical. This total build came out to 24.8 pounds. Frame alone, the titanium frame weighs 1.8 pounds less than the steel one. Because titanium is technically stronger, you can go thinner on the tubing profile. So in the 90s, people went crazy. They're like, hey, we don't need aluminum or steel. We can get super thin with tie and still have a light bike that holds together. Well, somewhat holds together. A lot of those old tie frames cracked, but a lot of them would flex because they could get the tubing so thin it was still strong, but it had this inherent flexy property because they got the wall thickness so small. So Nick has calculated wall thickness, tubing diameter into every different one of his 16 sizes. The tubing's different between them. Let's see if there's a noticeable ride difference in the titanium one. All right, back on trail. Still got that awesome Hummingbird feel. Interesting. The bike just feels a little lighter. It doesn't feel stiff like an aluminum bike, but the power delivery is more snappy and a little more instant. This is really interesting. It doesn't quite soak up the bumps as well as the steel one, but this has more of a attack fighter jet personality. Really interesting how different the personality is between the two. Kind of feels like I've got 2 PSI more in the tires. Kind of quicker feeling, sharper feeling. Gives you a little more feedback through your feet. It's not harsh. And I'm having a hard time putting it into words. I need a little more time. I noticed the difference immediately. I think most people would too if they were back to back and they could just pick one up. I think my attitude when I ride this, I just want to attack a little bit more. There's subtle differences. It's maybe 10% difference between the two. But I do think most people would notice it. You know what this makes me think of is my Miata. When it was stock suspension, it was pretty cushy for road trips, but it wasn't quite as sporty as I wanted. And I lowered it and put coilovers on it. And man, the braking was better, the turning was better, less body roll, but it was less comfortable for long road trips. That's how I feel this thing is. A little sportier right now. It's not harsh though. but it is bouncing a little bit more. I'm getting a little more chatter. This is still softer than a lot of steel frames, so by no means is this a harsh frame. I'm definitely feeling it on this stuff. Definitely jarring the body a little more. When I'm slaloming and coming into like a berm with some speed and you just kind of weight it and snap through, I feel the frame flex a little and kind of use a little rebound to kick me in. It's taking a little bit of getting used to. I don't feel it 90% of the ride, but when you're pushing it hard, I do feel a little bit more of that flex. Now, some of the other Thai bikes I've ridden do the same thing as well, but I notice that slightly more. So this still has that get up and go kind of sporty attitude, but I feel like when it's pushed really hard, like when I'm in the street and I'm just going left, right, I can feel the rear end kind of flex. And why wouldn't it? You're putting energy into it and it returns. And titanium has that interesting feel where it wants to give just a little more than steel. It feels a little more like a spring, feels a little more snappy. Let's keep riding and get a few more impressions. Again, these are all subtle differences. It's not like a light switch, like, whoa, that's so different. But a nuanced rider will feel the difference between them. And if you're spending this kind of money on a frame, I think it makes sense to overanalyze it and really think about which attitude you want the most. They're both so good. And I'd be thrilled with either one. This one, I don't know why, it makes me want to go a little faster. Just got a little bit of attitude to it. But I just kind of want to push the pace a little more. Oh, that's still really fun. Yeah, the only time I feel that flex is on really hard G-out corners. Oh, this thing wants to jump a little more. That little bit lighter weight just gives it a little more lively feel. What a special bike. I do get more chatter through the hands and through the feet on this thing. Still less than most steel bikes. It's just not quite as vibration reducing as the amazing steel Hummingbird. That's in a class of its own. It's only about 5 steel hardtails that are in that category of just really just eat up the chatter. It feels like you got Cushcore in there. Now, I got lazy and did not switch cranks. There's a chance these 5-dev Thai cranks are adding a little bit of stiffness to the ride. I'm gonna have to experiment with that later. Oh man, what a special machine. It feels lighter in the air, feels lighter on the ground. It just feels a little more like a race car, like Nick said. That Corvette and Cadillac analogy is spot on. This feels like my Miata with the lowered springs, sticky tires. Man, they're both so good at what they do. Hard to say which one I'd pick. Yeah, I just take corners a little bit faster with this. I brake a little bit less. I'm kind of seeking the thrill of speed more than just a chill, relaxed pace. It's so cool how bikes have personalities. A lot of people will listen to my reviews and be like, oh, I could tell you love that bike. Instead of listening to the excitement in my voice, I recommend listening to the concepts I'm explaining about what makes this great versus it just being great. I know we want to simplify it, but oh, I love this bike. All right, we're back in the shop to sum up my findings. But first of all, before we get to that, Nick likes you guys. He likes the channel, and he has a promo code that I'll link down below. If you're ordering a Neuhaus, use that code. You'll get some bonus swag with that. Now, I know everyone wants this whole thing summed down to one answer. Which one would I buy if I had one? Our brains want neat little categories. We want this quick little answer. Which is better, steel or Thai? It's not that easy. It really depends. For me, living in Sedona, I prefer the steel one. And I'm getting older. My body's getting a little bit more worn out. I'm not chasing KOMs. I'm not trying to be the fastest in my group. I'm just out there to get some exercise and connect with nature. And I like the steel one for that. But if I were to move to Northern California and start doing XC races, or if you're the competitive type who wants to be at the front of the pack, or if you're just attacking the trail every time you ride and not stopping to smell the roses, I think the Thai is going to be worth the extra cost. What would you pick? Let me know in the comments below. What did I miss? What did you appreciate about this? Did you learn something? consider supporting me through Patreon. If you want to take the deep dive and see Nick and I go into the rabbit hole big time on frame design and tubing selection and 3D printing parts and how do you decide which models have which tubing, we do that over on Patreon. You can access that video over there. You have to pay for that. Consider contributing with one of the links down below. You guys are amazing. Thanks for getting nerdy with me every time and exercising your big brain. We'll catch you later.